Hello and welcome to the Minds on the Frontline Podcast, brought to you by the Wayne State University Frontline Strong Together 5 program. I'm Geoff Lassers, one of the hosts of the Minds on the Frontline Podcast, and I've been a professional firefighter, paramedic, educator, and content creator for over 19 years. Minds on the Frontline is co-hosted by Mike Mattern, who is also a professional firefighter and paramedic with over 17 years experience. In addition, Mike is a peer support team member for his fire department and the Frontline Strong Together 5 program, as well as the chair of the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union Behavioral Health Committee and a board member of the Michigan Crisis Response Association. Bottom line, Mike has significant training and experience with frontline worker mental and behavioral health. On the other hand, I do not. My role is to produce the show, whereas Mike is a resident subject matter expert. Together, we hope to inform, educate, and entertain first responders, their families, and the general public regarding the realities of frontline work-related mental health challenges. Being a frontline worker can be hard. Being married to a frontline worker can be just as hard. In this episode, we welcome Audra and Chelsea from the Dear Chiefs podcast. Once upon a time, in the middle of a pandemic, two fire wives and complete strangers met on the internet and decided to start a podcast for first responders and their families. 3 years later, and the Dear Chiefs podcast is still running strong, with a weekly show and tons of great social media content. Through their podcast, Audra and Chelsea hope to help families understand, support, and build stronger relationships with their first responders, while also finding community and appreciation for themselves. We are also joined by Amy Ramsden, a nurse and the wife of a law enforcement officer. All three guests have been married to and built families with first responders. During this episode, they'll lean on their experiences to discuss the hurdles and challenges frontline workers and their families may encounter, as well as how they can manage or avoid them. It was a pleasure to sit down with Audra, Chelsea, and Amy to get their perspectives as the spouses of frontline workers. Enjoy the show. Well, hello, Audra, Chelsea, and Amy. How are you guys today?
Good.
Thank you for joining us today. Audra, let's start with you. Who are you? What do you do? And where do you do it?
I am one of the co-hosts of Dear Chiefs podcast. I am married to a fire captain in Northern California. We've been podcasting for 4 years on Dear Chiefs about how to maintain your marriage and relationship in being married to a firefighter. And I've got 4 kids and they're all teenagers. I've got a 30-year-old as well. And basically, I've been married for 21 years. My husband was not a firefighter when we first got married. So I've gotten to walk through this whole experience with him and we're still married. So yay for us. We're beating the odds. Okay.
I like how you said, well, my husband's a firefighter. It was like, he's a firefighter and I got 4 kids. So at least you perked up around the kid part. That's cool.
It's not all glamorous, everybody, but I mean, I love his career.
Being married in general is not always easy. That's
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
It's not an easy road to go down.
Yeah. All right, you, Chelsea, how about you? Who are you? What do you do? And where do you do it?
I'm the other co-host of Dear Chiefs podcast. I'm also from Northern California. I've been married to a firefighter for almost 16 years. And we have 3 wonderful teenage boys. I'm a work from home mom who specializes in wedding photography.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. A couple California peoples. And I know you guys haven't been to Michigan, but, it's not as pretty as Northern California unless it's summer. Actually, it's probably prettier right here, right now. And that's about it. Amy, who are you? What do you do? And where do you do it?
I'm from Southeast Michigan. My husband works for Michigan State Police in the CVED unit, so commercial vehicle enforcement. We've been married for, I think we're coming up on 11 years. We've got 2 little people. I'm a nurse practitioner for the trauma department at a local hospital. Tons of fun.
Right on.
All right. We got to be on our best behavior. We have the wives here today.
We do have the wives here today, and they're the polite wives. They're not the ones that just yell and like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. We actually cuss like sailors on our podcast, so we're good.
Then you'll be fine. You'll fit right in with us.
Okay.
We're married to police officers and firefighters. That's all they do is swear.
Let it fly.
Yeah.
Well, we like to start on our best behavior and let you guys decide what the language is going to be like.
Yeah.
But speaking of which, one of the big things we want to talk about today is the optimized work-life balance for frontline workers. And we want to talk about also those challenges and hurdles that present themselves that kind of knock that work-life out of balance. Chelsea, let's start with you. As the wife of a current dispatcher who's also been involved as a firefighter and an EMS provider, what does an optimized work-life balance look like?
So a little background for us, my husband works 72-hour shifts on a good day, right? So he's gone for his 3 days and he's home for 4. In a perfect world, he'd get that every week. And on his 4 days off, hopefully we're spending time as a family. We're all getting along. He's not checking his phone every 10 minutes to make sure he's not getting a text message from a firefighter or one of his subordinates or somebody that needs help with CAD or anything like that. It's just about being home with family and helping each other out. That's ideal. My biggest philosophies, I guess I should have pretense that with, is I know that you can't always leave work at work because you can't leave home at home. And so you're one person with many facets to your life and you can't leave all of it at the door, no matter which door you're going through. So ideally we work through that, right? Like we can talk to each other about what's going on at work and we can talk to each other about what's going on at home and come to a mutual understanding to get through the struggles and the good times together.
Okay, that seems totally reasonable for you to say it's not always going to be easy for him to shut off. I just got to realize that, kind of give him that space to do that. Cool. Audra, how about you? What does it optimized work-life balance look like in your opinion?
No overtime ever?
Yeah, well, wouldn't that be nice?
Adequate pay so they don't have to do overtime? I don't know. I mean, the work-life balance is going to vary by family, obviously. Like Chelsea said, in an ideal world, my husband comes home and is not checking his phone every second. Tablet command isn't going off. The overtime calls aren't coming in. Those kinds of things, where he can actually shut his brain off. He's been in the industry long enough to kind of know when he needs to turn it off. And we talk about that too sometimes when it's constantly in his hand and he's going crazy. So ideally for me, for our family, work-life balance is pretty similar to Chelsea in that when he's home, he's paying attention to us. He's hanging out with the kids. We're doing stuff as a family. We're really good at making sure, I think Chelsea is too, we have one-on-one time as much as possible too, because we know how important it is to keep our marriage at the forefront. Otherwise, you don't have anything if your marriage is in the toilet. So we make sure we do a lot of date nights and keep the communication line as open as possible. So there is no real work-life balance for us because it's pretty much chaos in this house, especially when there's 3 teenagers. We do our best, but you guys have little kids, so you're really in the thick of it still. And Chelsea and I are kind of on the other side, and we're like, whatever, the kids are going to do whatever, dad's going to do whatever. But when they were little, it was a completely different atmosphere where you're like, you take this kid, we're running zone defense today, and it's a shit show out here. But now it's more like, okay, we've got this kind of routine going and we're all kind of comfortable, and the kids are a lot better because they're more independent. So it's a lot less hands-on for us now. And it makes it obviously a lot easier because being in the trenches is a completely different story. There was no way Chelsea and I could have had this podcast 10 years ago when we still had little ones running around and grabbing our feet and terrorizing the house, because you don't have that kind of time when they're little.
Yeah, we were just talking about that earlier where, you come home off a shift and like we work 24s and you might have got 3 hours of sleep and you get home and your wife meets you at the door and is like, man, I'm tired. I got 4 hours of sleep last night. And you're like comparing sleep times to see who sleeps up, and
you're not arguing. You're just like, but you get into this competition where like, I only slept 2. Well, I only slept 2.
Yeah, so it is. It's a lot with the younger kids because the second you hit the door, you're on.
Mm-hmm.
You need to cook them breakfast. You need to get them dressed. And you're 100% right with that. And that's what I think where a lot of stress that we see at work come from is that butting of heads of there's only so many hours in the day and so many people to take care of the kids, and
it's all got to get done.
It's all got to get done.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a different animal when you're dealing with young ones. I had 3 under 6, so it was complete chaos.
Oh no.
Chelsea's pretty similar too. She's over here shaking her head like,
she gave me a panic attack.
That sounds awful.
It was pretty crazy. It was definitely an interesting time in our marriage when I was like, please take this child. I can't look at it anymore. And he's like, I am so tired. Yeah, it's definitely a different animal, but you'll get there when you're on the other side of it and you're like, oh, okay.
How about you, Amy?
Ever being before kids and thinking that about people and being like, oh, you can't really be that tired. And then having kids and going through school at the same time and everything and working. And I was like, I'm so tired. I could barely pick up my arms, let alone carry a kid around and feed them and clothe them and make sure that they're taken care of.
Absolutely.
Well, we got you here right now. In your opinion, you're the wife of a police officer. It's slightly different in the fact that he's just going with a different context and nuance when he leaves. But those same similar logistics exist where he's got to leave the job at the door and all that. So is it the same or a little different in your opinion for yours in your situation?
I feel like mine's pretty similar. I definitely expect him when he comes home to try to leave it there, be present. And we've had multiple conversations about being present. And when you're here, you're here. He is a sergeant. So his guys always like to call it dinner time. Every single night we sit down for dinner at the same time and their shift's ending. I get it. I do shift work too. Like you sit down at the end of the day, you make those phone calls, you get everything done to tidy up your shift. I get it. But sometimes I'm like, just put it off for an hour. You can contact him later. It'll be fine. Nothing's going to burn down, but we are very much a very give and take relationship. He gets him on the bus. I get him off the bus. I cook dinner. He's cleaning up dinner. We complement each other very good. So I think clear lines of communication, helping each other out, supporting each other. But I definitely feel when you come home, you're home. You can have your time to vent everything. Let's talk about it. And then let's go have some fun with the kids or with each other and go out for date night or go hang out with our friends and not think about work and just check out.
Yeah, be present is 2 words that is said a lot in my home by my wife. It's certainly something she reminds me of time to time because I get carried away. I do the firefighter paramedic thing and I do work my 24-hour shifts, but then I also work a couple side gigs and podcasting is one of them and it eats up a lot of time. So you can imagine like giving myself an excuse to hop back on another email or edit this or do that or make this phone call. It's real easy to get mission creep away from the daily duties of like, hey, you got 2 kids here that want to go play outside. So yeah. We do want to talk about some of these hurdles and challenges. So it really sounds like an optimized work life is really just the standard issue human stuff. Open lines of communication, try to leave your stress at the door that you have to go back to and try to manage that in the best way possible. But there's some obvious ones that tend to show up for all frontline workers when it comes to the work hurdles and challenges. So the work schedule, training, overtime. So let's get into those logistics. Chelsea, talk to me about how that as a hurdle can be managed or avoided. And I can't really avoid going to work, but I can manage the schedule. Can you kind of comment on that?
So for me, this is going to be really a unique answer because my husband works for a state department. And it's kind of like working for the military where when they say you're coming to work, you're coming to work. It's not, no, I can't do that today. It's you're coming to work. For example, right now, they are kind of short-staffed, and my husband has had 6 days off, not consecutively in 45 days.
Wow. Yeah. Ooh, boy. He's doing 72 in a row. That part alone, I'm like, is that legal?
That's not illegal. They sign a contract. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it. How do you manage that? Very, very carefully with a lot of grace. 45 days is a really long time.
Yeah.
I mean, a really long time. For the first couple of weeks, it's kind of hard. Like I have to admit, even after, 16 years of doing this on my own, I have struggled with it. But after about 2 weeks, then we got to get into our groove as kids and mom. And we just kind of start almost forgetting that he's not here. We just have our stuff that we do and keep busy and cook fun meals and we do fun things together. And by the time he's back, we're like, oh, you're here. So overtime from us really cannot be avoided. It's just a thing that's going to happen probably almost weekly in California, regardless of where you work. So that's not avoidable. What is avoidable is our attitude being horrible about it. So the way I look at it is he's going to be gone for as many days as he's going to be gone. How can I manage my home and my routine with my kids as easily as possible and have the most fun we can without being upset that dad isn't here? For us, like positive mindset is like everything. So dad's not here, but we get to like try that latest viral TikTok recipe tonight because that's what we like to do together. Or we're going to have an Avengers marathon. We're going to watch them all in order from start to finish. So those are kind of some things that we do. And then, obviously the day-to-day stuff, the kids right now, they're all sleeping, but at any given moment, you can hear their dirt bikes in the background because they're going to be out on dirt bikes for, hours. And that gives me time to focus on my work. So kind of in a nutshell.
Okay. So buy your kids dirt bikes. I like that.
Yeah. Buy your kids dirt bikes and do what they like to do.
Now, is there ever any kind of friction when he does come home and now he's got to kind of fit into your routine, but it's a different routine than when he left? Where he thinks, okay, we're doing A, B, and C. And for the past 2 weeks without him, you've been doing way different stuff. Is there ever any friction there, like trying to fit into that?
Yeah, I think for him, it's hard because the kids and I have very similar tastes in things. Movies, for example, we're big Disney freaks, right? My husband is not. He's like, I don't get why you guys need to sit here and have philosophical conversations about the Avengers. Like, what the heck is that, right? So fitting in with the kids is kind of hard sometimes because he's been gone and mom's been here and we've been doing all the talking about all the things. And then dad comes home and he's like, why are we talking about this? But then I think he's also really good about getting into what the other things that they do that he can relate to. Dirt bikes, for example, surfing. They have their things too. So I just kind of try to take a back seat to that as much as possible when he comes home and let the routine be his routine. And obviously sometimes that doesn't happen. But for the most part, I try to be like, okay, dad's home. It's dad time.
Okay.
Right on. So the way you manage that is to take advantage of the moment in the moment. Dad's not here. We all like Avengers. Great. Dad's here. He likes to surf and go on motorcycles. Let's roll.
Right.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah, that's awesome.
How about you, Audra?
Yeah, pretty similar. Other than what Chelsea said, I think the only thing I would say would be we don't stop our life when he's gone because that's not healthy and normal. So it's more teaching the kids how to keep going even when dad's not home or, picked up an overtime for today. So now we're kind of readjusting things. So it's more just keeping the kids focused and just moving and knowing that dad's going to come home and we already kind of have plans for when he's coming home. They like to pre-plan stuff to make sure that he's included. So we just say okay, dad, you cannot take this overtime. We're not like her husband's department. So I can say, please don't take overtime on this day because I really need you to be home. And for the most part, he will, unless there's some kind of Mando or crazy strike team or something. So we just make sure on the days when he is home that they're doing stuff with dad and I'm doing whatever, or we're doing stuff as a unit.
Yeah. And I think that's a big point to take home is that you can't teach your kids it's okay just to sit around and sulk and be angry that dad's gone. You got to be able to get on with the day. And that's such a human lesson to learn of yeah, that sucks. Well, I better move on. You know what I mean? And pick up you can be sad. Being sad is part of being a human. You just can't be in it and sit in it and live in it, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it comes with experience and time, right? So obviously when they were little, they were like, what do you mean dad's not coming home? Oh my God. But it was one of those things where it was you know what? We're supposed to go camping tomorrow. If he's not coming home, we're still going camping. Mom will figure it out. I'll bring a friend with me or I'll bring my mom or my sister or someone so that I have a backup. But it's one of those things where it's if you kind of keep going and just go dad will get here when he can. You got to keep moving. Life is going to keep going on. It's a good lesson for them and for us because at the end of the day, you can't control when they're going to come home. So you just roll with it.
And I think they adapt really well too. I mean, mine's 8 years old and he's now adapted to me 3 days a week. I'm gone for 24 hours. And then my last day of my round, he's like, oh, you're on a 4-day after today, right? Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. They do adapt finally to the schedule. It makes it a heck of a lot easier to where it's now normal that dad's not home 3 days a week. And I know guys at work have talked about it where one of the guys, his daughter went to a sleepover. They were talking and they're like, oh, your dad's home every night? And she didn't realize that other dads come home every night. It's one of those things where the kids just kind of...
They'll take your cues too.
Yeah.
You think it's okay. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And I think that's cool where, it's the kids will eventually adapt to it and realize it,
Yeah. To the point where my kids think that that's where he lives. He visits us.
Dad's got a second life.
So when are we going to go visit dad at home? Versus when is dad coming to visit? It's a joke, but it's true. That's really how they start.
Hours all the time. It kind of is your home. You're kind of split. What do you say, like a 45-55 split? That's not much of a difference there.
Right.
I'm only doing 10 nights a month away. And what's interesting is my wife, her dad was a professional firefighter for 30 years. So her entire life, she doesn't know any different. So she kind of had to marry me because it was just, Stockholm syndrome. She's just used to it. But in all honesty, when I was dating, it was a thing. You had to explain to somebody, hey, if we're going to like be a thing eventually, guess what? You know how I'm not here? I'm not going to quit my job. It's not going to happen.
Yes.
But Amy, your husband works 8-hour shifts, and I'm guessing it can kind of rotate between mornings, noons, nights, depending on the time of year. And so how do you manage that?
A lot of times it's just scheduling and getting together, sometimes weekly, monthly. Before, we had a lot of scheduling difficulties that we had to really work out and really concentrate on, because that was a big angst in our life, was trying to find babysitters for little people and and get people home off the bus or on the bus or here and there. It came down to writing out the calendar every month, sometimes weekly, adjusting it, talking about it every Sunday so we know all of our bases are covered, and to kind of take away any of that. But my husband was also gone for weeks before too, up training and stuff. And that was a lot. You have to rely heavily on your friends, heavily on your family to be there to help you, to support you. And with other girls, I would come home and be like, because he'd be tired. And he's like, well, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to, and I'm like, hey, buddy, life doesn't stop because you're gone. Life continues, and you got to either get on the bus or get off the bus because it's moving. So, and he surprisingly decided to stay on. I don't know why, but
Oh. You do need that though. My wife does the same thing, but she's like, yeah, you're tired. Your 2 kids aren't. Let's go. So I get, and it is nice to be motivated to get off the couch, because it would be like, it would have sucked if 3 hours go by and you didn't move. So it is nice to have somebody to kind of whip you from behind, and you kind of need that a little bit.
And you also, as the significant other, need to know when they also need their downtime too, because sometimes y'all can get really crabby sometimes and need your moments. So
let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Re-entry and that decompression time. Mm-hmm. Audra, how do you manage that? You can't avoid it, right? So I think avoiding the fight is managing re-entry.
Yep.
Back to the home.
Chelsea and I talk about this on the podcast all the time, and we have a lot of good info on our Instagram, because this is a huge topic that we come across a lot when we're talking to new firewives. I mean, really just new first responder wives in general, spouses, not just the wife. It comes down to really communicating with your partner, right? So when I know, like, my husband's working at a busy house tonight, so when he comes home tomorrow, he usually calls on his way home, right? Checks in. And I ask how his night was. If he says he's exhausted, only got 3 hours of sleep, I'm gonna be like, okay, do you need a nap, or what do you need when you come home? The first thing you see or hear is not screaming children or kids asking you for a million things, all these things. Like, let's give dad a minute to decompress. And now that the kids are older too, they know, like, okay, dad's coming home, he's tired. Let's give him an hour or whatever he needs, so that he can come home and not feel overwhelmed. And he's already tired. He's already maxed out mentally, everything. So it's really just about checking in with him and seeing what he needs. We have our routine pretty set when it comes to our house. So he calls on his way home. We check in, see how he's done for the tour or whatever. And then he'll either take a nap or we'll take the dogs for a walk. He gets that 20 to 30 minutes of decompression before I start telling him all the things that he's missed and all the things that are happening, and start firing off all this stuff at him, right? Because nobody wants to walk into total chaos. That's just not cool at all. It took us forever to figure that out too. I don't know why. We're just a little bit slower than most people.
I think you're right on track.
Yeah, he would come home and I'd be like, why are you so tired? What the hell? Here, take this kid. Like, I need to go do this, blah, blah, blah. And then we were both pissed off at each other all the time, right? Then it took, a couple years for us to go, oh, okay, so did you sleep? Are you tired? What do you need from me? And he'll ask the same from me. Like, what do you need me to do today? Like, can I take a nap? Or, I'm going to go play golf because I had a really bad night and I need to go blow off some steam, or whatever the case may be. Something healthy, right? Not, I'm going to go drink a beer at 10 o'clock in the morning with my guys at the bar. We're not doing that. Something healthy and a healthy outlet. Now he is really good about that. Like, we were both really good about checking in with each other and deciding, like, okay, what can we do for each other so that re-entry is a lot smoother.
I like the phone call on the way home to kind of check the temperature.
Mhm.
Like, what am
Yeah.
I working with here?
Absolutely.
Is he walking into a shit show or am I?
Yeah.
What kind of thing is about to happen here? I like that. Now that I'm looking back, I think I do that with my wife, and we kind of subconsciously, like, because like I said, I got 2 young kids. One might be screaming in the background because of, anything.
Uh-huh.
So you never know. And then I might have had a rough night, but I think it's a really good way to manage to just check the temperature. From there is much easier than having the expectation of when I get home, my spouse will do this in either direction.
For me, I would always say, if we had a bad night, I would text on my way home and just say, hey, we had a bad night. That was kind of a code word for, I'm going to need a little extra time, whether it was a bad run.
I don't think it's so much of a code. That's pretty straightforward.
Well, no, I mean, because you could say, yeah, my night was terrible. We had 3 runs after midnight, but they were like nothing runs.
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
But
Yeah.
if it was something where I needed a little extra space and time, it was kind of this is,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
I feel like over the years you learn their tone too. And as soon as you say, hey, how's it going? And they say, oh, everything's fine. You know instantaneously by the tone of their voice and the feel with those words, whether, okay, guys got to give dad an extra 30 minutes. Like he's going to jump in the shower when he gets home or whatever, just to give him that time to chill out and decompress.
And over time, do you think it's like the kids pick up on that? Like you said, we get crabby. I mean, it's probably all over our faces when we're all red-eyed, exhausted, and we're like, no, like nothing sounds
we're like
good
toddlers
anymore.
at that point.
Yeah, we're 6-foot toddlers that are just lumbering around like babies. So do the kids pick up on that, and do they learn to cope with that?
I think the kids realize it. Like they can read body language just like anybody else, unless they're too small. And then you just got to herd them the other way or show them some shiny toy and they'll go that way. But yeah, I think they pick up on it and they know like, okay, don't make eye contact with dad. Just avoid and walk away. And then, come back later and we can all have our cuddle time or our family time.
My kids are young enough, like I keep saying, but glitter is a primary color in my house, basically. And so when I hit that door, I got 2 little Tinkerbell pixies hit me in the face with everything in the sun. And it actually lightens my day because they're 2 little happy little kids, and it's great. But I could definitely see sometimes where it's like, I don't care how cute you are. We got to give me 5 minutes. I need coffee in 5 minutes.
I love you to death, but I need 15 minutes here. But
That's their defense mechanism, is being cute. So you keep them.
I also think like it's dangerous to make the assumption that they don't want their kids in their face when they get home. That's treading on a really fine line. I actually made the mistake of thinking once that my husband would not want his kids around after a long deployment on a campaign fire. And it actually was really detrimental because we actually have an entire podcast about it. He talks about it, but he wanted to see his kids when he got home because there had been some close calls with some kids on the fire and he just needed to see them and know that they were safe and give them a hug. And I sent them off to my parents' house thinking he'd want to come home to a quiet house. And so when he came home, where the heck are my kids? Right. So I think that we have to, part of re-entry into the home is having preloaded conversations about what they actually do need and respecting that. It'd be great if my kids were never here when he was home and we got that time to decompress and he and I got to reconnect, but that's not what he wants. And so I have to respect that and have them here when he's home. So just my 2 cents.
Oh, that's a great point, because just because you had a rough time, your needs may be different. Needing a nap is different from needing a hug. You know what I mean? It's a totally different need at the time. Well, let's talk about some of those needs. So there's this third family. You got your side of the family, you got his side of the family, then you got the first responder family. And I've had plenty of cocktails and parties with cops and firemen alike. Actually, I knew a couple of Michigan State police officers, and those guys, when they graduate, they like to have a good time. So I do know that in every first responder community, it's a very tight-knit group of humans that we tend to bond with, and we build these thicker than blood type situations. So let's start with you, Amy. How do you deal with the culture of lending your husband to his other family sometimes? You can avoid it, right? But how do you manage it?
I mean, sometimes it's hard. It's, when we first got together and were first married, I mean, all of his friends were also police officers. So we would go out to dinner and literally the whole entire time, that's what they would talk about at work. And it was just awful. Awful. I would just get up and leave the table and go wander around, go get my own drink at the bar. And while I'm going to the bathroom, whatever.
Right.
But I mean, over time, I think you kind of get used to that. And I know that he needs to blow off steam and needs to kind of have that outlet because there's some things that I will never understand, or the politics that are involved, or just those type of relationships that I'll never understand. So that's fine. Go have that time. But my only thing is don't blow off your family for them. That's my big thing. You can do whatever you want, but when I need you here, I need you here. He's great with that. So I can't complain. He really does both sides of the fence and tries to make sure that nobody's neglected.
So it sounds like as long as those decisions are healthy and they're scheduled appropriately, it's really not a big deal because, well, he's probably not somebody who's afflicted by being pulled into that too much, right?
No, they are kind of, he doesn't have a partner. He doesn't have that person that he drives in the car, stays with for 24 hours or bunks with basically, or, they go out to dinner every night or anything. They're kind of more solitude than I would think firefighters and stuff are.
Oh, yeah. We have a solid 24 and 12 that's just broing down like a couple dummies with 4 to 5 people in the house. It's just stooges. I feel bad for police officers and they show up on scene, they're alone. I'm like, all day you're alone. You got to wear all that stuff you're wearing. It looks heavy. You're in a car. Your back probably hurts. Your job sucks, bro.
Yeah.
We're way too social to be in a car by ourselves.
So Audra, firefighter husband, like Amy was just saying, it's a lot more of a social, it's like a team. It really is like going out with your baseball team, your hockey team, your football team. It has that feel. So on your aspect, how do you manage that sharing with the third family?
We call it the frat house.
Same thing. Yeah.
We're actually super lucky. My husband's department is really small. There's only 36 sworn firefighters. So they are super tight, and it's actually the perfect environment for him because we have that perfect balance of him going to hang out with them at work and outside of work, and us also hanging out with other firefighters and their spouses and their families. So I can't complain because he's not crazy out all the time with them doing stupid stuff. I mean, some of them are. Let's not get that.
There's plenty of people doing plenty of stuff. I'm just glad to hear I'm not voting on this one anymore or at all.
No, he's really good about keeping it chill. And I mean, like I said, we are beyond lucky. His department is amazing. And they actually do a lot of family events at the stations. So we have the opportunity to bring the kids and really hang out as a unit. So it's the best place for him.
Yeah, it's certainly, you got to go to the department that's best for you. And the size of the department's so big. So we have about 80 or 90 on the line, but it has a small town feel where we all know each other. So it's small enough where I'm not lost in the wash. So for you, the sharing is actually a good thing because it's bringing in more family bonding with good quality human beings that are extended. Yeah.
All the crew are amazing with our kids. So it's even better because the kids know and trust the people that my husband works with, which is huge for us because it makes them a lot more comfortable when dad leaves because they know he's not working with somebody who's not going to be the best. You know what I mean? Right. So they trust everybody that he works with. It's just the perfect environment for us. Totally works for our family.
Okay. So that part doesn't sound like it's bringing you guys any stress. In fact, it's probably doing the opposite.
No.
And what about you, Chelsea? How does that work with being gone that long? He's hanging out a long time with people. Does he want to get away from that family?
Yeah. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. We love his coworkers, but we also don't live where he works. So he's about 2 hours and 30 minutes away from where he works. Okay. And so when he comes home, he's not hanging out with people that live 2.5 hours or more away. So the nature of his department is most people don't live where they work. So you can live anywhere in California and work anywhere in California. You can actually live out of state and work in California for CAL FIRE. So there's no living requirement. And so it's a little bit different. If we're hanging out with his people, it's because we're at the station where he's working. And so he does have friends, but they're not going to be probably the people that he works with. And I'm really lucky because he doesn't really want to go hang out with anybody else. He wants to be with his family when he's home. So we don't have that issue. So I can't really speak to it.
I wouldn't want to see anybody I worked with if I was doing 72s all the time.
I would see him enough.
I'd be like, I'm good. I'll see you however many days later, 96 hours later. I don't need to see you. I'm going home. I don't want to see a phone. I don't want to see nothing. Yeah. That would be me. So I get it.
But I think it's also important to have those friends and those relationships outside of the service that you work in because, when you get to the fire functions, the police functions, obviously everything goes right to work. It's so important to have those relationships outside of the service that you're working for, that you don't have to have those conversations with them. It's the little jokes that you have, you grew up with the person. But I know people that only hang out with other firefighters.
Yeah.
And that's all they have. They got nothing else in their life. That's a balance also you have to have, is you got to have those outside friends that have nothing to do with what you do.
That's actually pretty scary, I think, if you are only hanging out with fire bros or the fire peeps. It's like, you probably need to do something else with your time, I think.
So let's move into the family specific stuff right now, right? So it sounds like when it comes to the work-life balance stuff, it's leave it at the door. You got to work overtime sometimes, but you got to check in with each other to make sure that the needs are both met on both sides, so that when you come home, there's more of a blending. Because I know you ladies are not exactly just waiting for us to come home well rested. You know what I'm saying? You guys have had, like you said, life goes on, whether you're home or not. And life, it can be very hard, right? So it's kind of like just maintaining that communication to make sure everybody's on the same page when you do hit the door. But there's also extended hurdles to really talk about within that family. Number one is just like keeping the burner on for the significant other. So what are your recommendations to manage that so that you don't avoid it and get divorced?
It's hard, man. I think any relationship's hard, right? I think it's the lines of communication, keeping them open, talking, revisiting things. That's a big one. Like if you're not open and honest with everything, then you might have to revisit a couple times and get everything worked out and the kinks worked out, which is easier said than done. Sometimes you need help from others to figure things out. And I think also putting others in front of yourself. So even where you're like, I really want to drop off this kid in your lap, like recognizing the fact that they might need a few minutes. Like, what can not make this explosive right now? Can I put myself to the side for 5 minutes, half an hour, whatever it may be, so that it doesn't come to an eruption, where I'm like, here, take the kid, take the baby, I'm out, where, okay, he needs that 10 minutes, give him that space, then we can come together later and talk. But like, you also need that private time and your date nights to like reconnect and just be you and not be a relationship, or if it sounds bad, but a family, because kids are so demanding.
So, yep. Well, it sounds like what you're saying is the relationship between you and the significant other, keep the kids out of it. It isn't passive. It's just not. It can't just exist because you're taking care of the kids. Well, the kids are great. Everything's good. Things are clean. Things are good. No, it's got nothing to do with that.
Yes. It should be your guys' relationship and then the kids, because your happiness is going to trickle down.
Right.
If you guys aren't together, if you guys are at each other's throats, then the kids see that, and then, it just breaks down everything. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. We fight, we argue, whatever, but I'm going to wait until the kids go to bed, and then we're going to go outside.
Right. Okay. So yeah, choosing your time. What about you, Chelsea? How do you kind of manage the stresses of life on top of this, and then also the relationship?
So for me and my firefighter, it's really important to us to communicate all the time. So he calls me every night that he is at work, and it could be a 30-minute conversation, or if he's really busy, it could be a 5-minute conversation. It could be longer than that. Who knows? So we're always communicating. We're always talking about our day, about what's going on. I'm not keeping anything from him about what's going on at home, because the assumption is that when he calls me at night, that's a time when we're going to communicate both of what's going on, right? So that's number one. Number two, we've already had preloaded conversations, as I discussed with you before, about what he needs when he comes home. Right. And so I know what to expect when he walks in the door. I know if he's had a long shift because I've talked to him every night. So that part for us is pretty easy most of the time. When you add the kids into the mix and all their expectations, then that's where we get a little bit more complicated, right? So we share a calendar on Google. We have a shared Google calendar. All the kids' activities, all of my activities, all of his activities are all in the calendar. Everyone can see it. So we all know what's happening this week. So he's not walking into, oh crap, I didn't know we were going to the beach tomorrow, or I didn't know Christian had to work today, or, various other things that are going on. So that's number three. Always keep a shared calendar. Like everybody knows on the same page what we're doing. We plan things. If he doesn't feel like he can attend them, or he gets an overtime day or whatever, then that's fine, but he's always invited to join the party, right? And then, just like Amy said, open and honest communication about absolutely everything. Like, you can't hold stuff back. And you also need to talk to your spouse about what you can handle hearing about work. I think a lot of times our firefighters want to protect us from what they've seen or heard on the job. And you don't know what you don't know about what I can handle. So don't assume that I can't hear the gory stuff that happened at work. You need to offload that when you get home. That's great. Offload it. But have preloaded conversations about what's too far. What's going too far? Like, I don't necessarily need to know that some guy got decapitated and you had to pick his head up off the ground, right? Like, I don't need the gory details of all of that. But you can talk about what you've seen and heard at work with me. That might not be for everyone.
What you're saying is to have those boundaries established well ahead of time and maintained.
Right.
And the calendar one, you ain't kidding about the calendar one.
Your calendar is key. The giant kitchen calendar where
we do the digital. We got the Google calendars, we got the shared stuff, and it's like, man, that solved so many issues just knowing when and where things were going to happen. So that of course I know we're going to your mom's tonight. I know it because it's on the calendar. Like, just those.
That's why I picked up overtime.
and then also, like, in order to reconnect with each other physically and mentally and emotionally while they're at home, you have to have time alone. So make it a point to prioritize alone time away from your children, whether that be a backyard picnic with the kids after they go to bed, or whether that's going out to a nice dinner, whatever that looks like for you. But make sure you prioritize at least one night when they're home to do something together.
What we recommend in our house is we get the babysitter to come over when the kids wake up and we sleep in, and then we sneak out and go to the gym or lunch or whatever. That's our favorite. The morning wake up and you don't have to get up with kids. Like everybody's like,
it's kind of brilliant, actually.
Yes.
I totally agree with Amy and Chelsea on all of it. We keep a shared calendar and we really make sure we communicate what's going on in the house. But I mean, in the last couple of years, we have definitely kind of shifted into really focusing more on us and maintaining our healthy relationship, because now that our kids are at the age where they're getting into relationships, we want to make sure that we're modeling good, healthy attributes, because we want them to bring home the same thing, right? So I used to feel really guilty about leaving the kids with a babysitter or leaving them with my mom and going out, just me and my husband, on a one-on-one. But I don't feel guilty at all anymore, because if we are not in a good place, our family's not in a good place, the kids know that something's going on, and it's not a good environment for anybody to be in. So definitely over the last couple of years, we've been taking way more vacations, just the two of us, and hanging out together pretty much on a regular, he's a 48-96. So one of those 96 days, we're going on a date night. We're doing something, just the two of us. We don't feel bad about that at all. It's one of those things that's going to make us feel more connected and in touch with each other. And it's important. It's imperative for us now.
Yeah. I mean, making the time at least once a week where it's just the two of you, put the phones away, you turn them off, you spend so much time away from home. Mm-hmm. And like you talked about, when we're home, you want us to be present. But when we're home, we also want whoever's at home to be present with us as well. And if we don't have that, it's very easy to drift apart between life, work, you name it. So, I mean, I think that's key to have that timeshare both ways. When you're here, we need you here.
So a lot of what we talked about today, I think, applies to every human that has a spouse, right? This isn't new to anybody. But there's certainly an added layer of cultural or societal expectations for first responders. People may think things about us as firefighters or paramedics. They may think things of law enforcement officers and what they should do. Maybe they watch too many TV shows. But I'll start with you, Amy. What cultural or societal expectations, hurdles, challenges does your husband and your family face as a police officer family, and how do you manage them?
So I know we kind of touched on it before, but when you guys walk in the door, everybody's super nice to you. Say my husband walks in the door, pulls you over on the side of the road, your defense instantly goes off. So I think I've had people say very, very rude comments to me about my husband, saying, hey, I bet your husband's a police officer, he must beat you. It's crazy to me that people say that or think that. It's a job, it's not the human. Any human can be shitty, right? any human can be a great person. So like, it depends on that person. But that, and then family, our family's pretty open. Our neighbors are great. Our community is great. So it works out very well. They're all welcoming, all very understanding, and go above and beyond for us. And we do as a community and friends and family. But I know others who are very private, who tell their children not to tell others what their parents do. They tell them to make up fake jobs about them. They don't let people in the house. They're very untrusting of others because they've been burned in the past. So I think you just get a little bit more protective on what the kid sees and hears, because a lot of times they're, oh, well, my dad said your dad, even my family's did that to me before, because my dad was a truck driver, so he was like, oh, your husband did this and blah, blah. No, that wasn't my husband.
And your husband's in the commercial vehicle unit, so I'm sure they have some just conversations about.
Yeah, so they've had some, talks, but I mean, ultimately it's the person, it's not the job that makes the world go around, right? So I don't know, but it's just every family is different. Our family's very open and honest with others, and everybody knows what he does, what I do, and it's okay.
Well, how do you help the kids manage those opinions of others?
I just say everybody has a right to their opinion, but you have to remember, like, do you think that dad's a bad person? Do you think that, that Uncle Eric's a bad person, or Uncle Brent is a bad person? No, you don't. Like, they're still good people. People just have different opinions, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with different opinions.
That's a good way to do it, because you could just say, well, you know what they do. Become a spiteful person and turn it around and talk crap about old Susie down the street there and her husband or whatever.
I'm sure they all have good attributes, just the same as anybody else. I mean, I've been around many different people in my life, and it's not that they're all bad, or it's not that they're all good. It doesn't depend on their profession or what they do on the weekends. It's just, everybody's different. Everybody's allowed to be different.
Well, they should be. Hopefully, you kind of want them to. As a firefighter's wife, you get the, thank you. You get the thank you for your service a lot for being a firefighter. You're the hometown hero. You get a lot more credit. In my opinion, I've always been treated a lot nicer than my police officer brothers and sisters around me. What challenges or societal expectations exist around that for you and your family?
Well, Chelsea and I were talking about this earlier, and I think we're kind of on the same page with it. We get the glorified husband, right? He always is like, gets these big awards and accolades for like being a firefighter. Well, it's like, no, he's really just another human being that decided that this was going to be his career. And it's interesting. A lot of society, regular citizens just assume that most firefighters are cheaters. They're always hooking up with the nurses. We hear that all the time. Or the people in the ambulance, like they have any time to be extra cheaty than the regular people on the street, right? Like
extra cheaty. How about
yeah. You're extra cheaty. So it's just like Amy said, it's not the job, it's the person. There's always going to be somebody whose marriage doesn't work. And the divorce rate, as Chelsea, I'm sure we'll talk about too, is not any different for firefighters than it is for the average Joe.
Yeah, they're both high.
Yeah, exactly. I think the divorce rate in the US is like 50%. So firefighters in particular is actually not higher. It's a little less than 50%, if you can believe that. So it's just one of those things where it's kind of a glorified job. And yeah, we always get the, oh, thanks for your service. But we are very fortunate. We live in a very good area where we make sure we say thanks for your service to the police officer that's walking down the street and to the male person who's walking down the street. Like, it's one of those things where it's society has this dumb label. I shouldn't say dumb label, but this label on these firefighters, like they're somehow better than everybody else. And that's just not true. They're just a human, and this is what they decided to do with their job. So, and I probably humble my husband way too much by reminding him of that. Like, just kick you down a notch there and make sure you know.
You should. My wife does the same, but she's doing it in a way of like, easy, bud. Like, you're just.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think a lot of us actually get uncomfortable kind of with it as well, because we don't look at ourselves like that. And when we're shopping in the grocery store at work and people come up and, hey, thank you so much for what you do, blah, blah, blah. Don't get me wrong. It's nice to hear, but I always get uncomfortable. Like,
It's awkward.
it is, because it's like, well, I'm just doing my job. Like, I'm here
Yep.
doing my job. Like the guy at McDonald's is making your hamburger. Do you think
Exactly.
his service? You know what I mean?
No, you don't even tip that guy.
That's my point. Is I think we get uncomfortable with it as well when people come up and kind of put you on that pedestal. I think first responders in general, we're all very humble people that don't really want the recognition. We don't want to be up there with the award and everybody's looking at us and that kind of stuff. So I think I know why people do it, and it's awesome that they do it. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where we all kind of like, we're not any better than anyone else. We just do a job that puts us in positions to do things that are out of the ordinary.
And it's more fun than yours.
Well, yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, way more fun than ours, right?
I got friends that shoot weddings. I know how much of a pain that could be.
Yeah.
Difficult. But Chelsea, let's finish it up with you. Same thing, same question. What cultural expectations or hurdles or challenges does your husband and family face based on his job and circumstances?
So actually, I have an opposite experience than Audra. Sometimes we don't get thank you for your service. We get, why didn't your husband save my property? Because we are state firefighters. And as you know, California has very large fires that happen. And it's sometimes people's houses burn down. And society has a really hard time with that sometimes. And so I have on many occasions been asked, like, why couldn't they save my house? Or what was CAL FIRE thinking? Or, things like that. And, these guys are doing the best they can in the worst case scenarios. And it's not personal. There's risks that they cannot take. And so it's really hard. That's a really hard one for us.
I can say that I agree with you, Chelsea, because I feel like people, with the pedestal thing, they put you up on here. And then at the same time, you have to answer for the whole department on any decision that they make throughout the whole entire state, no matter if you agree with it or not. And it's always, thank you for your service, but why didn't you do this? Or why were you sitting here and not here? Or why weren't you? Yeah.
Why did you save that side of the street and not the other one? Like,
yeah.
And they literally, there has been times when they've literally had to stand in the middle of a street and decide we're going to save this side and let that side go. And it's tough. It's really, really tough.
Yeah, nobody wants to make those decisions. Nobody wants to have that burden, but there's always going to be two sides of the fence, right? There's always going to be something that's going to be a loss and something that's going to be a win.
And it's tough. I get it. As a civilian myself, I understand that I don't know how I would feel about my house burning down or my whole community going up in flames. I get that. That's beyond my comprehension of how I would even feel. But also these guys are just doing a job. And so that's, for me, that's probably the toughest societal thing that happens in our world. Also that I'm going to know every single thing about every little fire that happens in California, and everybody wants to know the updates and everybody wants to know what's going on. And I'm sitting here listening to the scanner. No, absolutely not. I am not listening to the scanner. That's number one. I do not do that. And number two, I don't really want to know what my husband's doing or what kind of danger he's in until he tells me later. I want to hear about it after the fact. And so I am not the news broadcaster of what is going on in California. So that's another tough one. And then obviously for my kids, there's been several occasions at school when their friends have asked, is your dad going to die on a fire today? Because there's this huge fire going on 2 miles down the road or whatever. And it's not in malice. They're just kids. They're asking legitimate questions. My dad doesn't do this for a living. Oh my God. I can't even think about what I would be feeling if my dad did this. And so my kids have developed these coping mechanisms of, I'm not going to school today if the sun isn't visible. I'm just not doing it. I can't answer these questions. I'm not able to do that in this moment. I wasn't thinking about the fact that my dad was in danger. I was thinking about the fact that I was at school, So those for us, those are the hardest things as far as the societal questions that happen. And then I just want to reiterate what Audra said. That people think that all firefighters are cheaters or the divorce rate's so high. I think that those are things that actually the fire service has told you to scare you out of the job, to scare you out of taking the job, right? Because they're trying to weed out the people who they think can handle it and that can't. And so that's oh, Well, if I tell you that you're going to get divorced automatically because you become a firefighter, maybe you'll just decide that that's not what you want to do. And I've just weeded out the weak among us, right? So that's my personal take on that.
I think some guys use it as an excuse just to get a divorce.
Possibly, yeah.
I've known some guys like, I'm pretty sure it's you. I think it's a we problem here.
Yeah.
It's always a we problem.
My husband's department kind of does the same thing. They have like, after they all get done with recruitment, they stand back and they say, okay, like bring all the wives or all the significant others into a room and talk about like stressors of the job and how to deal with it and stuff. So they are kind of encompassing with that and try to be supportive, but it does really scare some of them. And it makes them stand back like, oh, do I really want this? And this is really could be more stress than what it's worth. And I could lead this nice life over here, or I could be over here helping. So,
and I think a lot of departments now just recently are starting to do that. They're starting to give the tools to not only the spouses at home, but the first responders, kind of like what we're talking about today, at least around here, of, okay, these are things that you can run into. These are things that may come up. These are things to help start those conversations of, okay, well, what are we going to do if you get mandatory overtime? Or what are we going to do for that? And I think in the long run, that's going to help. Does it scare people at the time? I'm sure it does. But I think they're starting to realize that there's a big component here of, okay, we need to learn how to do this or else it's going to go south. And so I think the podcast and just us having this conversation now, when people listen to it, it's not as scary as it may sound. Does it happen? Absolutely. Marriage is tough to begin with, but it's also tougher when the person's not there a couple days a week, or even more so in other situations. That's not normal. So I think having these conversations is one of the big things that's really going to kind of turn this around a little bit, is giving people the information, but not in a scary way. Like, hey, it can happen, but hold on, we've been there. This is what we did. These are the landmines we stepped on. Don't do the same as we did. One of those things. It's kind of like you're bringing up the probie couple as they come on. You know, the more seasoned couples are going to talk to the new ones and say, "Hey, listen, this is what
the
happened."
Successful couples.
Yes, the successful couples. We'll go with that.
I think you make a valid point. I think it didn't start out that way, though. I think it started out as a scare tactic, and then as we evolved as human beings, we realized that, okay, but wait, maybe that's not the way to go. Mm-hmm. So when I say that's the thing that departments told people to weed them out, I think they really did do that in the very beginning of like this whole thing, right? And I agree with you. There are a lot more resources now than ever for spouses and, you know, firefighters to really try to strengthen the marriage and get on the same page. So
I've told this story before, but when my husband first got hired, he was still in the process, and his fire chief at the time called me on the phone and asked me if I could handle it. And I was like, what am I handling?
What are you saying? What does that mean?
Yeah.
That's an open-ended, weird thing to ask somebody randomly.
Yeah. And I was just like, what am I supposed to say? He's in the interview process. No, I can't handle it. Sorry. Like, I just was like, yeah, sure. Totally. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But I had no idea what he meant. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, well, that's what he meant. But it would have been a little bit more helpful if I had gotten some details. So, I mean, that's really why we started our podcast and why we share so much on our Instagrams. We get spouses every day saying, where was this 10 years ago? Like, if I had known half of this, my life would have maybe been a little bit easier, and I wouldn't have had to go through so much shit to come out of it. You know what I mean? Like, it could have been really, really useful. To Chelsea's point, it's like, yeah, now we're making a little bit of headway, like with podcasts like this, and with you guys doing the peer support stuff in your state. It's amazing, and it is helpful. There is always going to be that marriage that doesn't work out. It just is what it is. People are going to be scared. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to be scared, because you really don't know what it's going to be like until you walk through it. But at least we can make it a little less scary by helping you and giving you the tools to kind of understand how to deal with it and how to at least try to make it work. If you're still scared, well, then you probably married the wrong person. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, I think you guys all provided very valuable tools that seem very obvious now. One, communicate all the time, open and honestly. That's like probably 80% of the road there. The rest is manage your logistics, talk about the schedule, follow through with the schedule, and know at the end of the day that things are going to happen. You're going to be tired. Everybody's going to be cranky. But if we do those two things and probably a couple more along the way, it's going to make life a little bit easier. And to your point of nobody ever said that before, it seems really obvious, but nobody ever told you that before when you start out with that. Everybody says, oh, good communication relationship. Like, well, that's double important when you're gone for 24 to 72 hours at a time.
You're really, really tired and you're both on edge. Yeah. Communication isn't always the greatest.
Right. And especially for you coming home from the hospital too, you guys don't exactly work just a couple of hours, and hospital work sucks for the last 5 to 10 years. It's not getting any easier.
Sometimes on top of the 24s, and I did a 36 before too. That was fun for us. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes.
Maybe we should have had him on here on how he handles you with your stress.
Probably. I am very, very blessed to have him. He's great. So awesome. I'm lucky.
We're very blessed to have all of you guys here. Chelsea and Audra, tell everybody your Instagram handles and all your socials they can find you on.
You can just find us on all social media at Dear Chiefs Podcast.
Perfect. That was the easiest way.
Short and sweet.
Well, we thank you guys very much. We had a really good time with you. This went longer than we expected, but in a great way. And we really appreciate all of your time.
Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Audra, Chelsea, and Amy, for joining us on the Minds on the Frontline podcast. We hope everyone enjoyed this episode. We have more great content coming out soon. Be sure to check out the Dear Chiefs podcast, dearchiefs.com, and all of their socials at Dear Chiefs Podcast. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.